Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Nikki Rausch joining us. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Yes. So Nikki, for those that aren't familiar with you and your work, you are a speaker, author, founder, CEO of Sales Maven, where you teach businesses how to sell without feeling uncomfortable. You've successfully sold to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, HP, NASA, and many other companies. You're also the author of, a couple of books, but most recent, I believe, is The Selling Staircase, Mastering the Art of Relationship Selling. We'll talk more about that as we go on here. But what I'd like to do before we get into a lot of the good stuff that I think will be very practical, applicable, hopefully valuable and beneficial for everybody joining us, I'd love if you could give us a bit of background on how you got started. So before you started your consulting business and doing training, all that kind of stuff, what were you doing? What was kind of the original version of Nikki like?
The original version was I was a salesperson for hire. So that was my career. I worked in the tech space and I worked the majority of my career at the manufacturer level. So selling to dealers and distributors of a product, different products, different companies that I worked for over the years, doing a lot of demonstrations, a lot of traveling. I was a road warrior. I say that my airline used to send me a Christmas gift every year. So that tells you how much I traveled. Wow. If you've ever gotten a Christmas gift from your airline, that shows like you're doing a lot of travel. So I think I was doing, 120 flights a year, 70 nights of hotel stays. It was just a crazy life.
You were like that George Clooney. What was that movie with George Clooney? And there was some other actress. I can't remember who the name.
Yes.
Was it Up in the Air? I think it was called, or
Up
something
in the
like
air. Something. Yeah, I don't remember what it was called, but I know exactly what movie you're talking about. That was me. Right. Always on a plane, always going somewhere new. Yeah.
All right. So you did that. Now I have to call something out right away because some people will just be listening and they won't see the video. They're going to hear your voice, but and I think that's really what I want to like hit on. You don't come across as being like, hey, let's get a sale done. I'm going to go out there and make sales happen. Like the stereotypical, right, kind of like alpha male energy of sales and pushiness. And I know we're going to get into a lot of this.
Yeah.
But was sales always something that you were excited to get into? Like, was this something that you were looking forward to? And that, like, how did you end up actually getting to sales? Because just listening to how composed you are, calm you are, like more of a serene voice, right? It doesn't jump out as being the typical, what you would imagine a salesperson would have. And so where did that sales kind of, come from? Like for you to get into sales and do it at those levels?
So you've hit the nail on the head. I am definitely not your traditional salesperson. In the industry that I worked in, it was a very male dominated industry. I was usually the only female salesperson on the sales teams that I was on, especially in the last 10 years of my career in that field. So I'm introverted. I tend to be shy. So I had to figure out how it was going to work for me. But I will say, I did have some upbringing that led me down this path. So my grandfather and dad owned a tool store. And at the age of 10, I worked in the tool store, like ringing up at the cash register and, and all through my teen years. And my grandfather, he loved to talk about money. He loved to make money and he loved to talk about money. And so we had a lot of conversations. I spent a lot of time with them. And when I moved to Washington State, I grew up in Boise, Idaho. When I moved to Washington State, I had to get a job right away because I was newly married and I got to go back to school. I was going to finish my degree and I needed money to come in. And I got my first job working at a mall kiosk for a holiday season.
Right.
And it was the first time that I ever made commission. So the job was, minimum wage. Was way back in the old days where minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. And they had this commission structure that depending on how many hours you worked, you had to sell a certain amount. And once you sold over a certain amount, you would be paid commission. And so sometimes I was doubling and tripling and even doing better than that as to what my hourly wage was. So I got really hooked on this idea of like, wait, I can control how much money I make just by being really good at what I do. So the commission piece was very attractive to me. And then when I was in college, it was a big, huge college project. Like 80% of our grade was around going out and digging into a company, getting a company to let us come in and interview people in all the departments and come back and do this huge presentation about this company. And the company that my partner picked was this tech company in this tiny little town in Washington State called Paulsbo. And they actually sold the third LCD panel ever made. The panel was I don't even know if you might be too young to remember these, but they sat on top of an overhead projector and they hooked up to a computer and you could see the image up on the wall. It was like this flat panel. So that's when I started selling. And again, it had this commission piece to it. And I got really excited about commission sales and what that would do for my life.
Yeah.
And again, male dominated industry, I had to find my own way. So when I went to the manufacturer level, I also started studying neuro-linguistic programming. I don't know if that's a new term.
NLP. Yeah.
NLP. Yeah. So I really dug deep into it because I thought this is going to make me a better salesperson. But what it really did was it made me a better communicator. It made me able to pick up patterns, language, the way that people spoke. It made me better at building rapport with people. So I really focus on this relationship side of sales, and I've had a lot of success just being me and being strategic.
Okay. So I want to come back. I have some notes here to ask you about the NLP stuff as well. And there's so much that we're going to unpack because I think this is going to be a very action-packed, valuable episode for people. But before we move forward, one thing I want to kind of clarify or get your perspective on, do you that in fact, because you are a woman, but back in the day, you're working in this male dominated industry as a woman. In addition to that, you are the exact opposite, I'm guessing here, of the typical approach. So like the approach that you saw that was dominated by men, you didn't really like that approach. It didn't feel like it was right for you. Do you think that actually provided an advantage for you in a way that it was a distinction between what most buyers expected? And so I'm just playing this out here like as a bit of an improv, but would that allow them to kind of lower their guard and go like, oh, this is different, this is refreshing? Or am I way off the mark there? Like, how do you think that fit into? And I'm wondering, I guess I'm asking Nikki partly because there's a lot of other people out there, regardless of gender and so forth, who just feel like, yeah, I'm an introvert. I don't like sales. I don't like the typical sales approach. And you're almost showing, I think, that some of these things that people on first kind of glance might feel would be a disadvantage for them can actually be an advantage for them.
Yeah. So I would say the thing that works, and this is the stuff that I now teach, is you have to find your style, what is authentically you. So, I've worked with people that are that really hungry, aggressive sales mentality. I've worked with many over the years, but they, every once in a while, they don't usually come and hire me anymore, but every once in a while they will come and hire me because they want to learn some type of a skill or technique that I'm teaching.
Right.
Usually those people kind of shy away from me because they're like, oh, she's too soft for me. But the thing is that whatever your style is, it's learning how to be strategic and find a structure. So I believe in structure, that there's a structure to excellence. This does come from my NLP background, that when you can find a structure and you can apply it in your business or in your life, you can get exceptional results if that structure is a proven structure. So I teach a lot of structure. So regardless of your style, we've all been on the receiving end of working with somebody who's kind of got that aggressive, but they're kind of fun to be around. Like they've got that really high energy. They're fun to be around. And when it's really authentic to them, it's okay. Like we go, that's kind of them. And that's right. Who they are. So I kind of like it. But then when you meet somebody who's coming across really pushy and aggressive and it feels gross, it's usually because that's not really their true style. They're trying to sell like somebody else, or they're trying to do things that they've read about or been taught that just doesn't really resonate. So I'm going to say, I think it's more about being true to who you are and having some structure and some strategy and being more focused on the other person, because the easiest way to earn somebody's business is for them to feel like you care about them, because you do care about them, and that you're not there with your own agenda. Like, I don't believe in trying to convince people to buy from me. I truly think that if somebody has a need or a want, it's my obligation to offer them a possible solution, as long as they've given me permission to do that. And I will really stand in my place of credibility. Like, yes, I'm shy, and yes, I'm an introvert, but I really do know what I know. And I don't hold back, in that I'm not afraid to recommend what I think somebody needs and that's going to make a difference in their life. And I will never recommend something that is more about, I just want the money. I don't care about that. Like, I would rather have the relationship than have the sale.
Yeah. So I just had Bob Berg on the podcast not too long ago.
Oh my gosh, I love him.
Yeah. So Bob's an awesome guy. And so Go Givers is the book, kind of what made him very well known in many circles.
Yes.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of kind of overlap between what you're talking about and what he's talking about. And I've seen this play out with, I'd say that, the best salespeople out there, the best people that are focused on sales or have had success in their businesses, that, yeah, they're focusing on value first, on serving first, not on transactional sales, which is where a lot of people get mixed up. And, I think it's partially understandable, especially if you're earlier stage in your business, because you're so hungry just to generate revenue that your mind tends to think like, I need to transact now, I need to bring in the business. And that actually can end up kind of hurting you or shooting yourself in the foot, because you don't have your best foot forward, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into
The Go-Giver. Such a great book.
Go ahead, Nikki.
I just want to say The Go-Giver is one of my favorite sales books.
Oh, awesome.
And completely opened up like my mind around, I don't have to sell like everybody else. I can be me.
Okay, well, we'll put a little pin in this one. Come back. Let me know at the end of the podcast, and we can talk about some stuff connected to that in a moment. I want to turn the spotlight back on you. So what was the impetus for you to stop working as an employee and start your own consulting training business in this area? What was going on in your life, and why you decided to make that shift?
Well, I'd mentioned that I'd been in the industry, in the tech space, for a really long time. And when you get in an industry like that, it starts to become pretty small. Like, the same kind of people, they might change their business card, or the name on their shirt might change, but they're kind of the same people. So I found myself, this is a true story. It was a Saturday morning. We were setting up for another trade show. In the tech space, you do a lot of trade shows. So here I was, Saturday morning, San Jose, California, setting up for a trade show. And I was looking around the room, and I was looking at all the vendors. It was this huge auditorium, and I could see clearly around the whole room, all the vendors that were there. And I knew somebody at every single booth. Mm-hmm. And it was like this huge hole opened inside me. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was very close to turning 40. And I thought, I don't want to be here when I'm turning 50, talking to the same people, doing the same thing. So I got really interested in like what's missing in my life, because I had a good life. And if you asked any of my friends or family, they'd be like, she's living the dream. She's traveling. She's doing all this crazy stuff. She's making great money. Like, everybody thought I was living the dream, but there was something missing. And I left the industry and I went to work for my NLP teacher. She had just moved to Washington State, and she'd asked me to help her build her business. So I started doing some sales and marketing for her company. And that was when I started hanging around entrepreneurs. And it was like, entrepreneurs to me are the coolest people, because they have a passion and they're going like full force with this passion. And I just wanted to like rub shoulders, like hoping some of that passion would rub off on me. And as I got to know more and more of these entrepreneurs, as I was showing up at networking meetings and, hanging out with these people, I realized that a lot of them were struggling to make money. And the reason they were struggling to make money is because they didn't understand sales. Nobody had ever taught them sales. They weren't comfortable with sales. But at that point, I was almost, I was more than 20 years into my career of selling. So I just started helping some of them on the side, really, just wanting to be of service. And, I had one person in particular who we used to ride together to a networking meeting, and she would just pick my brain the whole way there and the whole way back. And finally she said, Nikki, why are you not teaching people how to sell like this? It works. And I said, that seems dumb. Like, who would pay me to talk about sales? That seems dumb. Like, the stuff that I teach is so like, it seems natural to me and it seems easy to me. And she said, this is not natural and it's not easy to everybody else. Why don't you just try this?
Mm,
And so I made her a promise that I would, I would give it a go.
yeah.
And here I am 8 years into my business, having the time of my life working with the like coolest people in the world, actually.
And so is that how you got your first few clients, by just kind of starting off
Mhm.
doing almost quote unquote free work for people, and that just transitioned into more business of that kind? Or was there a concerted effort on your part to go out and get business for you?
It really was. I thought I'm either going to go back and get a sales job and start making some real money again, or because I wasn't making any money working for my NLP teacher, or like I think I could have gone and worked at McDonald's and made more money that
Mm,
year. It was pretty bad. And she just didn't want to work as much as I needed her to work, frankly, in order
right.
to make the kind of money that I was used to making. So I thought I'm either going to go get a real job, like a sales job, or maybe I'll start this business thing. And this woman that I had mentioned, she had been talking me up to her CEO, and they ended up hiring me to be their keynote speaker at their national sales conference that year. And my business was really born from there because I went and spoke at the event.
Mm,
Ton of people wanted to do sessions with me afterwards. And my business just started to roll. So I started putting together offers. I put together a course. I hired a coach right away because I knew I don't know anything about being an entrepreneur. So that's again, that's the story. 8 years later, here I
there we
am
go.
having the time of my
Well,
life.
let's dive into a little bit more around the actual nuts and bolts of sales. So you
Okay.
can kind of share some of the stuff that you're seeing working really well in the industry right now. Um,
Yeah.
Scripts. Do sales scripts have a place? Is it important to have them? I mean, do you find that there's a benefit to using sales scripts? And if so, like, when would people even think about, or should they be thinking about using them?
I love this question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me this, or if they have, it has been recent. So thank you for
Yeah.
this question. I will say I'm a little anti formulaic type scripts where you say this, the customer's going to say this, and then you say this other thing, because that's not how conversation really works.
Mm-hmm.
So I like scripts, I like examples, and I give a lot of scripts to get people started in the conversation. So, for instance, I teach. It's really important that you have a structure to the questions that you're asking in a discovery process. Here are some potential questions. And some of these questions have to be very tailored to your business.
Mm-hmm.
So I teach people how to come up with what those questions should be. But I'm not a big fan of, and I did this because one of my first professional sales jobs was kind of that dialing for dollars. And we had this script in front of us that we would read. But it was kind of like, when they used to get telemarketers calling you at home during dinner and they
Right.
would just, word vomit this script. Like, I don't like those. I don't think it's a good use of your
I don't know
opportunity to
anybody
build
that likes
relationship.
those, right?
Yes, they're so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not opposed to a script. I do a lot of, I always call them language suggestions because I don't even like the word script, frankly. So my workbooks for my master classes are packed with language suggestions, and it's more to give people the structure
Mm,
of the conversation. Like, if you're going to write an email and you're doing a cold call type email, here's some structure that's going to be more impactful than the standard, word vomit emails that we get as cold emails in our inbox all day long.
yeah, I think that's great advice. And I remember one of our clients in our one of our coaching programs. We provide like a sales conversation script for people to, as you said, it's not that you're supposed to read it word for word, but just as a way to understand and kind of get comfortable with the process. And so I remember he went back and he just practiced it, like reading it himself over and over again, just to get comfortable, right? To understand like what is the flow. And then he went out, and I think he landed like 4 of the next 5 conversations that he had, turned them into pretty lucrative consulting engagements, just because he knew like what to ask and what to think through. So I agree. I think that's a really great way to look at it. So let's take the consultant who has had a great conversation with the buyer. They've identified in the conversation the buyer needs help, the buyer wants help, but the consultant doesn't ask for the next step. They don't ask to close the sale. Why does this happen?
Okay. Well, I think why it happens is because they're not comfortable with the process yet. And one of the big mindset, I think, mistakes, or one of the false like lies that we tell ourselves is that if somebody wants to hire us, they'll let us know. I actually had a woman tell me this one time. We were speakers at an event. Her name was Sarah. And I was talking about buying signals and how people give you buying signals and how it's so important that you act on them in the moment. And when we were done speaking, we were kind of standing off to the side, and she turned to me and she said, you know, Nikki, I know you say that you have to like invite people to do business with you because that's really the only way they're going to say yes. But I sell to adults. That's what she said to me. And so my brain starts going a million miles a minute of like, she sells to adults. Don't I sell to adults? Who doesn't sell to adults? Like I'm like rolling this through my brain.
Right.
And finally I said, tell me more. Tell me more about that. You sell to adults. She said, yeah, if people want to hire me, they'll let me know. And I said, oh, okay, sister. No, they won't. Because our brains are lazy and we have decision fatigue. And we often won't make a decision unless it's put in front of us. So if you have a great conversation with a project or a client that you know you can bring in your consulting services and you can rock it for them, you have to close by issuing an invitation. Yeah. Because until you get that close, and it has to come out of your mouth, and it can be something simple. It can be like, you know, here's the proposal. Is that something you'd like to move forward with? That's a simple close question. If you don't ask that, then what you don't get is one of the 5 responses to a close, which I always say is either a yes, awesome, you have a new client, a no, okay, we got to check and see what did we do wrong here, or they have a question that you have to answer in order to earn their business. I had a great coach. He used to always yell this at me, Nikki, most people are one question away from hiring you. Give them an opportunity to ask the question. But you got to get to the close sometimes for that question to bubble to the surface. Or maybe they have an objection, which I need to know about. And that's only going to come out when I've asked for their business. Yeah. Or the 5th thing, which I think happens more so than not, is people say, I need to think about it. And this is another place where I feel like people make a huge mistake in the selling process is they go, oh, okay, well, I'll call you next week and check in with you. No. If somebody says they need to think about it, let's make sure we have a call scheduled to review their decision and any other questions they have. So when someone says to me, I need to think about it, I say, great. About how much time do you think you'll need? Let's go ahead and schedule a circle back call now. That way I can answer questions that came up for you and we can decide about working together. And what about how's your Thursday at 10 look?
Yeah. So no, sorry to interrupt, Nikki. I just ask you, like, what are your thoughts about in that situation when somebody says, I need to think about it? Do you find it effective, or is it for you a best practice to say, you know, great, of course, like out of interest, or just, you know, what do you want to think about, or what's kind of still left that you're thinking through? Do you ask that? Do you find that's important, or do you just say, okay, great, like let's schedule a time?
Depending on how the conversation has gone, I'm probably going to check and say, I'll usually say, that's totally fine. Can I ask, is there anything that we haven't talked about that will be useful for you to know in order for you to make your decision? Right. Because I just want to check. Because some people are like, I don't make decisions on the first call, right? Or some people are like, I need to check in with my business partner, or whatever their reason is. I'll honor the reason. And I'll check to see, like, did I miss a step? Do they need something else from me? And if not, now by having it on our calendars, what I find is they actually do think about it. And they'll usually make a decision to hire me. Oftentimes before we even get on that circle back call, they'll either say, no, I'm not going to hire her. So I'm going to cancel my appointment with her and there's no need to talk. Great. Now they're not wasting my time or theirs. Or they come to the call going, I've got one more question for you, Nikki, and then I'm in. Great. I have a very high close rate on my circle back calls.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting. I think some people will be listening going, well, you know, Nikki, I've experienced that I do generate business and I don't have to ask for it. And my response to all those people who might be kind of doubting or just wondering how this plays out because they haven't necessarily needed to ask for business is just that that's wonderful. Like if you're in a place where people are just coming to you, you're winning business, you're not having to ask for it, all good. But almost certainly, if you're not asking for it, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. Like there's going to be a lot of opportunities and conversations where if you're not asking, right, or if you're not suggesting that next step, you're almost certainly leaving a lot of opportunities. So this is definitely a best practice. regardless of where you're at in your business.
I totally agree. Amen. 100% everything you said. I'm
right.
so in alignment with you on that.
There we go. Let's then shift to talk about pricing strategies. I'm wondering, what have you found from a sales perspective? I mean, you've worked on large size deals. You worked on smaller size deals. How important or effective have you found it to be to begin with kind of entry level offering, like a discovery offer, and as opposed to going right into a larger full engagement offer? So price point wise, right? Discovery offer, I mean, it could really vary, but let's say anything from $1,500 to $15,000, $25,000 compared to a full engagement, which might be $50,000 to $500,000 or even $5 million. Like, in your experience over the years, is it a best practice? And do you recommend that people begin with something smaller first as a way to kind of get their foot in the door, develop or kind of strengthen the level of trust, deliver results and proof, and build that relationship first before trying to go to a larger engagement? Or have you seen a lot of success in just going right into a full engagement?
I think that so I teach a structure to a sales conversation. I call it the selling staircase, and there are 5 steps in it. And the third step is the discovery. And if you're selling a high ticket or a really high touch offer, you're probably having some kind of a conversation with somebody. Maybe you call it a consultation. I call it a discovery. And in there, your job is to ask the right questions to find out what's the need or the want or the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you move to step 4, that's proposal. That's when you're laying out your offer. And I think my answer, I promise I'm going to answer your question, but my answer is based on what the person has shared for me or shared with me about their need, their problem, their want. I'm going to recommend what I know is going to get them the solution. So if that's a $15,000 engagement, that's going to be my first recommendation. If it's a $5,000 engagement, I'm not going to recommend the $15,000. So I'm going to recommend what they need, not what I think they can afford. And if they say, oh my gosh, 15,000, Nikki, that's not exactly what we had in mind, then I'll offer them a step down. Here's how we could get started together. Gotcha. Now, I have offers in my current lineup that range anywhere from, just being really candid, $27 up to $10,000. And not everybody's going to be the right fit. And I don't always know where people are. So I like the idea of giving people a way to start with you that are like on the fence, right? For me, a little $27 offer, it's very limited risk for somebody to take a $27 offer from me. Sure. And like, I'm going to dip my toe in the water with this chick and see if she's got anything of interest. Now, I have turned $27 offers into $10,000 sales within a very short period of time, because people will dip their toe in the water and go, I'd like some more of this. Yeah. What's next? And I give them the next step. And then I give them the next step after that. So I think in your business, you should probably plan to have this tiered approach. And don't ever be afraid to recommend what you know somebody needs, because you are the expert. There's a reason they've come to you and talked to you, or, initiated some type of conversation with you. So be the expert. I only want to work with experts when it's my money on the line. So Be the expert and recommend what you know they need.
Let's talk about NLP.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned this is an area that you got into relatively early, or at least before starting your business. Many people may not be familiar with what NLP is. You kind of referenced it a little bit, but why don't you kind of go ahead and give your definition, or how you view what is NLP, and then we'll get into a little bit more of how you've applied it to your business.
Okay. So NLP stands for neuro-linguistic programming. So neuro is the way we process information in our brains. Linguistics is the language piece. So how I speak to you, any internal dialogue that I have, and any way that you speak to me. So that's the language piece. And then the programming has to do with habits and patterns. And when you can start to recognize how people are showing up in a conversation, you can add flexibility to your behavior to make the conversation easier for the other person. So I teach based on my all-time favorite quote, which unfortunately I don't know who the author of this quote is, but it's, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." So I teach flexibility. How can you show up in a conversation, still be yourself, still be authentic, and be flexible to put the other person at ease, not to manipulate, not to try to convince them of anything, but to allow for them to be really present in the conversation and for them to make a decision as to whether or not they're interested in continuing the conversation with you. So so it's really the study of communication. That's the most basic term of it, but it's also learning how to add some flexibility to your behavior. Because when you show up in a room and you're like, hey, this is me, this is my style, take it or leave it, go kick rocks if I'm not for you. A lot of people will leave it because they'll say, you're not for me.
Sure.
But if you show up in the room and you have some flexibility to your behavior and you're not trying to tell people like it's my way or the highway, people are probably going to want to engage with you more. They'll be more inclined.
So can we take that and apply it to a sales conversation? So, we have consultants in many different industries all around the world that are tuning in and joining us right now at many different stages of their business, from, getting started to all the way up to very developed with, large teams and so forth. So everyone has sales conversations, right? In one form or another. If we apply NLP to sales conversations, what would be an example of a good application of NLP? Could you maybe just kind of create a bit of a situation and then introduce how you would apply NLP and what would that look like?
Well, yes, absolutely. So here, you tell me if you want me to go more in depth, or if you don't like my situation, I'll come up with a new one. But I'm suspecting that a lot of the consultants listening to this call are delivering proposals, for instance, to a prospective client. Okay. Now, in a proposal, one of the big mistakes that people make is they write their proposals from their perspective.
Sure.
So here's what I'll do for you. Here's how I'll solve this problem. Here's all the things that you'll get when I do this, this, and this. But that's about you. And the other person is more interested in them. So an NLP technique here is to turn this around and make the messaging more you focused than I focused. Here's what you'll receive as a result. Here are the benefits you'll get from this. Here's how your company will, experience such and such. So make them you statements. They're so much more interesting to the reader than it is to a bunch of I statements. I'm going to help you. I hope this helps. I want to do this. It's like, nobody cares what I want. They really only care, how is it going to impact them? So making some switch in your language is a big thing in proposals.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful concept. I remember learning about this many years ago when, studying copywriting and some of the greatest copywriters of our times, and even before my time. Because I think many of them applied NLP ideas, and that's what made some of their copywriting. So that's a very powerful copywriting kind of component, is to write for the person, not for yourself, or like really position them at the forefront and not the other way around. And you are right that consultants tend to do that a lot in their presentations, talking about their own methodologies, and it's all about them and their deliverables. Clients don't want that. Clients want it to be about them, their situation. They might want to know what your deliverables are, but a lot more important, they want to know what will the outcome or results be, right? What kind of value will be created for them? How will they be in a better place compared to where they are today? And so you want to focus on those things in your proposal. All right. Well, before we wrap up, Nikki, I have a few more questions for you. And one is, so you've been building your business now for several years. What are one or two kind of habits that you bring into your life on a regular daily basis that you find really help you to maintain higher levels of performance and productivity and focus and success? Anything that you do as a human being to kind of stay at the top of your game?
Well, one of the things that I do is I invest a ton of money and time in my own personal and professional development. So that I've been doing that since the very beginning of my business. Actually, I did it obviously through my studies of NLP, because none of the companies I ever worked for wanted to pay for any of my trainings.
Do you think about that in terms of like a percentage of your overall like annual revenue, or is there any kind of framework or structure that you have for how much you're going to invest each year?
I'm going to say that if you ask my CFO, I think her and I have gone back and forth about this, that it can be anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on the year.
Okay.
So I'm pretty serious about investing in myself. And I try to put myself in rooms and around people that I feel like I'm not for, I know this is going to sound mean, but, and I don't mean this negative to me, but one of my coaches said this to me one time, because I was telling him, gosh, I'm so uncomfortable in this room. These people are so much more successful. He's like, congratulations, you're the dumb, poor one in the group. That's who you want to be. So I really do try to put myself in rooms where I'm very uncomfortable and I feel very stretched by being around people who've achieved things that I have either not yet achieved or I just haven't reached that level of success.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I do every day, frankly,
Perfect. Yeah.
is I put myself there. And then the other thing that I do, which is more for my mental health, is I take walks along the Boise River. And I find that to be a real like place of peace, calm, and clarity for me.
Love it. And then how about over the last 6 months, a book that you have read or listened to, fiction, nonfiction, just anything you've really enjoyed that you think others might also enjoy?
Can I give two?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I did just read not too long ago, Atlas of the Heart, which is Brene Brown's new book, and it talks about emotion and how those show up. And I do think that is super important and relevant to sales, but I also think it's really relevant to how we interact with people.
Sure.
And then I just started reading a book that was recommended by one of those people who's, stretching me to be around and hang out with this person. And I think it's called The $100 Million Offer. And I just started
Alex
reading it.
Hormozy.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm not reading it. I'm actually listening to it on Audible, and I'm totally down with some of these concepts that he's talking about.
All right. We'll link that up in the show notes. And then most importantly, Nikki, thank you for coming on here today and sharing with us some of your journey and your story and your best practices. I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and everything that you have going on. What's the best place for them to go to do that?
Well, the easiest way is if I wrap this around a gift, maybe for your listeners. So I like to give when I get to come on and be in front of somebody's audience. So I have an ebook. It's called Closing the Sale. It kind of talks through the last 3 steps of the selling staircase. It gives some language suggestions or scripts if you want. And it's all about boosting your confidence in that close. So you can get that by going to my website, which is yoursalesmaven.com, and then /consulting. So this is very specific for your audience.
There we go. Okay. We will have that linked up. Again, Nikki, thank you so much for coming on here today.
Thanks for having me.